The First Amendment is only 45 words long, but it's the most powerful limit on government the world has ever seen. It protects your right to speak, publish, pray, protest, and call out the government itself. But how well has the Supreme Court really protected these rights? Today, we're going to break down the five freedoms of the First Amendment: speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition, and put the most important Supreme Court rulings to the test. Did they defend your liberty or hand more power to the state? And of course, we'll judge it all through the only lens that matters: libertarian principles. So buckle up, because after today, you'll be a lot smarter than your average authoritarian. Speak now or get silenced. Free speech on trial. Let's start with the one everyone knows: freedom of speech. You'd think this one would be obvious. Say what you want, period. But the Supreme Court, they've made a mess of it over the years. In 1919, Charles Schenck was handing out pamphlets during World War I. The government charged him under the Espionage Act. The Supreme Court ruled against him, saying speech could be punished if it created a clear and present danger. That's where that famous and completely abused phrase comes from. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And we've all heard that one used before. Whenever someone says it's like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater when you say something. Libertarians say wrong answer. Schenck wasn't committing fraud, threats, or inciting violence. He was opposing government war policies, arguably one of the most important things free speech exists for. A truly minimal government would have left him alone. But then we have the redemption. In Brandenburg v. Ohio in 1969, Brandenburg was a KKK member. Gross, I know. But he wasn't directly inciting violence. The court ruled that speech is only illegal if it is likely to cause imminent lawless action. Now, that is a proper libertarian test. You're free to speak unless you're directly inciting violence right now. Everything else, protected. And one of my all-time favorites, and it was a great common law one too, Texas v. Johnson in 1989, flag burning, hot button issue. As offensive as it may be, it is political speech. The court rightly said government can't ban expression just because it's unpopular or offensive. The libertarian takeaway: speech must be protected, even speech that you hate, or no speech is safe. The only limit: actual, imminent, real violence. Stop the presses. The fight for free media. Now let's talk about the next one: freedom of the press. The Supreme Court actually got this one surprisingly right most of the time. The first case we're going to talk about is from 1931, Neer versus Minnesota. Shut down a state law that allowed the government to censor newspapers before publication, known as prior restraint. Libertarians cheered. Information should flow freely. You can't trust the state to decide what you're allowed to know, but we still do it anyway. Then came the New York Times v. Sullivan, 1964. During the Civil Rights Movement, public officials tried to sue for defamation over minor factual mistakes. The court said, unless there's actual malice, knowing falsehoods, you can't sue. This protects journalists and activists from being bullied into silence. And finally, the capstone, the Pentagon Papers case. New York Times v. United States, 1971. The Nixon administration tried to stop the Times from exposing Vietnam War lies, like the war in Cambodia. The court ruled, sorry, government, you have to meet a very, very high bar to suppress publication. The libertarian bottom line on this: a free press is your shield against a lying government. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. The more the press exposes, the less power the state has to lie and manipulate. Keep the faith, government and religion. Religious freedom means freedom from government interference, period. In Engel v. Vitale, 1962, public schools had students recite a state-written prayer every morning. The Supreme Court said no, even voluntary prayer written by the state violates the Establishment Clause. Government has no business writing anyone's prayer. Then came a really good case out of Wisconsin, Wisconsin v. Yoder, 1972. Amish parents didn't want their kids forced into public high school after 8th grade. It violated their religious beliefs. The court ruled for the Amish, government can't force kids into its system if parents sincerely object on religious grounds. That's libertarian gold. Parents, not bureaucrats, should be raising our kids. But then there was a turnaround in the Employment Division v. Smith, 1990. The court blew it on this one. 2 Native Americans were fired for using peyote in religious ceremonies. The court said that as long as the law is generally applicable, the state can enforce it, even if it crushes religious practice. That's a huge overreach. The libertarian rule. You're free to believe and practice however you want so long as you don't violate others' rights. The state should accommodate religious conscience, not bulldoze it with neutral laws. The right to gather, assembly, and association. You don't just have a right to talk, you have a right to gather and organize. Nothing wrong with that. In Dijon v. Oregon, 1937, a man attended a peaceful Communist Party meeting. Oregon tried to jail him for attending. The Supreme Court said, no, peaceful assembly is protected even for groups we despise. Liberty means defending unpopular voices. In NAACP v. Alabama, 1958, during the Civil Rights Movement, the state demanded the NAACP turn over its membership list for pure intimidation purposes. The court ruled this violated freedom of association. Libertarians love this one. The state has no right to force you to reveal your affiliations. Privacy is part of liberty. Today, governments still try to expose political donors, protest leaders, and activist networks pretending it's about transparency. Libertarians like myself, we see it for what it is: intimidation by the state to silence dissent. Assembly and association are your weapons against government overreach. The minute you can't freely organize, you're defenseless against tyranny. And before you say, well, the protests in LA, they're peaceful. No, they're not. You can peaceably assemble. And finally, the most underrated First Amendment right: petition your government for a redress of grievances. You can lobby, you can file lawsuits, you can ask Congress to repeal laws. Petition is your official channel to confront government abuses. In McDonald v. Smith, a guy petitioned against a government appointment but was sued for defamation. The court said, petition is protected, but not if you knowingly lie. And that's a fair balance. You can criticize officials, but you can't commit fraud doing it. But here's the real issue today. Governments and corporations weaponize lawsuits to silence petitioners with SLAPP, SLAPP suits. That stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. Libertarians fight these hard, and certain states have passed laws that make them harder to bring. Your right to petition is critical when politicians ignore you or when courts fail. Petitioning is how people without power still get hurt. And the bottom line, a minimal state must not only tolerate petitions, it must be responsive to them. The whole point of government is to serve you, not rule you, and we have lost that as a society. So, there you have it. The First Amendment's 5 freedoms, a century of Supreme Court battles, and one unshakable libertarian truth. Government will always seek more power. It's your job and mine to fight back against these overreaches. If you value free speech, free press, religious freedom, peaceful assembly, and the right to petition, then you're already thinking like a libertarian, but you just didn't know it yet. So do me a favor, hit the subscribe button right now or the follow button wherever you're listening. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and iHeart Radio. I thank you for your support. Share this with one person who thinks government always has your best interest at heart, and there's a lot of them out there on both sides of the spectrum. Spoiler alert, the government doesn't have your best interest at heart. It only has more power for itself. This has been Are You Smarter Than a Libertarian? I'm Jeff, and as always, stay free, stay informed, stay accountable. Have a great day.